The lid of the piano bench was warm from the late October light when Maren Salston lifted it on the afternoon of her grandmother's funeral, and the first thing she saw was a man's careful handwriting on a page that should not have been there. She had come back to the house to be alone. The reception was still going on at the church hall, 3 streets away, her mother pouring coffee for cousins, her aunt cutting lemon cake into the small sad squares funerals were eaten in, and her grandmother, who had carried Maren to this very piano on her hip 31 years before and taught her the names of the keys with a tin spoon, was not anywhere anymore. Maren had told her mother she needed to go change her shoes. Her mother, who knew better, had given her the house key without a word. She had walked the 8 blocks to the green-shuttered house. She had not changed her shoes. She had gone straight to the front room where the upright stood under the bay window, and she had sat on the bench because that was the only place in the house where she still knew exactly who she was. Her grandmother had always told her not to keep sheet music inside the bench, but to lay it on the rack where it could breathe. Maren lifted the lid out of a small, soft rebellion she could afford now. Underneath, where she had expected dust and the worn-out Microcosmos Volume 1 her grandmother had refused to throw away, was a stack of paper a half-inch thick, the top sheet yellowed at the corners but still good, the title inked in a careful hand that was not her grandmother's. Suite in 3 movements for piano. 4. M. The composer's name was underneath in the same hand, smaller, almost shy. Axel Salston, 1968. Maren did not move for a long time. She had been Maren Salston for 25 years. She had been Maren, the conservatory student, for 4. And she had been, her whole life, the granddaughter of a woman who had said exactly once, when Maren was 9, and had asked, that her grandfather had left before her mother was born, and that she did not wish to discuss him again, and would Maren please not ask. Maren had not asked again. She picked up the top sheet of paper. Her hand was steady. She noticed that distantly, the way you notice the steadiness of someone else's hand. The paper was old but clean. The ink was the dark blue of a fountain pen filled in the days when men carried fountain pens. The staves had been hand-ruled with a wood ruler. She could see the small wobble where the ruler had slipped at the 3rd bar, and the notation was crowded and assured with the small dotted phrasings of a composer who hears what he writes before he writes it. The first movement was called Lullaby for a Daughter I Haven't Met. She set the page down. She set her hands on the keys without thinking. She played the first 8 bars. She had played for adjudicators and audition panels and a hall of 900 in Stockholm the previous spring, and she had never, in any of those rooms, played a phrase that did to her what those 8 bars did. The melody was simple, a falling 5th, a rocking 3rd, a long-held breath at the end of the 2nd bar where the dominant didn't quite resolve, and it was, unmistakably, written for her mother. For a daughter, the man who wrote it had known he would not see. The harmonies underneath were a man trying, in private, to say a great deal in a small voice. Maren played it through. Then again. Then she set the page on the rack the way her grandmother had taught her flat, not creased, and she cried the way she had not been able to cry at the church. The mantel clock that her grandmother had wound every Sunday since 1962 had stopped on Tuesday at 4 in the afternoon. The hour, Maren realized, when her grandmother had died. Maren turned the page. The second movement was called Walk Home With Me. The third was called What You Will Find After. She did not play those yet. She picked up the stack of paper and went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, because that was what her grandmother had done in every emergency of 78 years. She turned each page carefully. There were 142. The first 38 made up the 3 movements of the suite. The rest were songs, short pieces, 2 pages each, every one with a small handwritten dedication. For M, the morning she said yes. For M, on the train from Uppsala. For M, the first time we heard the river ice. For M, the day she told me. For M, on the night I went. She read every dedication. Then she went to find her mother. Her mother was 68, a tall, calm woman with her own mother's high cheekbones. Maren found her at the church hall stacking cups. "Mom," Maren said, "I need you to come home." Her mother looked at her face. She set the cup down. She told her sister she would be back later. They walked the 8 blocks in silence. At the door of the green-shuttered house, her mother put her hand briefly on the doorframe, the way Maren had seen her grandmother do for 30 years. "You found something," her mother said. "I found him." Maren put the sweet on the kitchen table and a fresh cup of tea in front of her mother. Her mother put on the half-moon glasses she had been pretending not to need and read the first page. By the 3rd, her hands were not steady at all. "Mum," Maren said, "who was he?" "His name was Axel Salston," her mother said. and Maren noticed her mother's voice was different around the name, as if it had been waiting at the back of her throat all of Maren's life. He was a composer. Film, mostly small Swedish films in the late 60s, but concert music when he could. Your grandmother met him at a conservatory party in Uppsala in 1967. He was 28, she was 26, and engaged to somebody else. She broke the engagement in a week. And then her mother put a finger on the title page, very lightly. He wrote the suite for her in 1968. She was carrying me. He went to Oslo to record a film score in December. He never came back. He was on a train that derailed outside Holden the day before Christmas. They identified him by his watch. He was 29. I was born in March. Maren waited. Your grandmother did 3 things that year, her mother said. She buried him in Uppsala in the family plot she had been promised to the other man. She gave me his last name, and she put every page of music he had ever given her into the piano bench he had bought her, and she closed the lid, and she did not open it again. Not in 57 years. She told me when I was 12 that I would understand one day. She was always right about timing. Why did she say he left? Because saying he died was the thing she could not say out loud. She was a Lutheran from a town where you did not let the village know you had loved a man enough to lose him. The lie that he left let her keep his name on me without owing the town an explanation. I have known since I was 9. And me. You she meant to tell. She told me last Easter she had been waiting until you finished the conservatory. She thought you would play it correctly. Did she ever play it? Her mother smiled. Very small. Every night, her mother said. She thought I didn't know. She would wait until I was asleep. She would close the parlor door. I lay upstairs from the time I was 4 until the time I was 19, and I listened to my mother play in the dark music that I would not be allowed to hear in the light. She told me once that the second movement was the only walk they had taken in Uppsala the autumn she met him, and that she had walked it every night since. I think she walked it last Tuesday. There's a man we should call, her mother said. A musicologist at the university in Uppsala. He has been asking for 30 years if your grandmother had any of Axel's papers. She always said no. He will be 82 now. Tomorrow, tonight, I'd like to play it. With you. If you want. Her mother put her hand over Maren's. I would like that very much. They went into the front room. Maren sat on the bench. Her mother sat in the armchair by the bay window, the same armchair her grandmother had sat in for 57 years. Maren played the suite through. She played the lullaby for the daughter Axel Salston had known he would not meet, and the daughter sat by the bay window and let the tears come down her face without sound. She played the walk home the way a young man and a young woman had walked one autumn through a university town the year before he died, the way her grandmother had walked it every night for 57 years alone in the dark. She played What You Will Find After slowly. It was the shortest, 40 bars long. It moved like a man closing a door behind him in a house he was sure he would return to. When she finished, the mantel clock had not started. Her mother lifted her face. Thank you, her mother said. Maren turned on the bench. He didn't go, she said. He just got pulled away. There's a difference. There is now, her mother said. The musicologist in Uppsala took the call on a Friday morning. His name was Kjell Brink, and he was 82. He said almost nothing while Maren read him the dedications. He had been one of Axel Salston's 3 friends in the spring of 1968, he said, and the only one still alive. He said he would come to the house himself if she would let him. He came that Sunday. He was small and white-haired and walked with a cane carved from an apple branch. He sat at the kitchen table and read the suite straight through without speaking. When he got to the last page, he put both hands flat on the paper. He told me, the night before he went to Oslo, that he had written a suite he could not show anyone yet. He said it had taken him a year. He said the woman it was for was carrying their child and that he would show her when he came home. I have wondered for 57 years what was in it. He looked up. Will you play it for me? Maren went to the front room. She had the suite by memory after 3 days. She played it for Kjell Brink, the lullaby for her mother, the walk for her grandmother, the closing movement for the young composer who had been able, in the end, to leave a door for somebody who came after. When she lifted her hands, Kjell wept openly. I would like to ask you something, he said when he could speak. There is a small festival in Uppsala in the spring. Chamber music, 200 seats. I am the artistic director. I would like you to play this suite there, under his name. The university has a small recital hall named for him already, although nobody under 60 remembers why. He taught one term, in the autumn of 1968, before Oslo. The students paid for the plaque after he died. Maren looked at her mother. Her mother was crying quietly into a paper napkin. "Yes," Maren said, "I will play it. Will you write the program note? I have had 57 years to write it." They drove to Uppsala in the spring. The recital hall was on the second floor of a brick building on Tredgatan, and the plaque on the door said Axel Solsten, 1939 1968 inches plain Swedish capitals. Her mother stood in front of it for a moment before she went in. 200 chairs. An old Bosendorfer the festival had been borrowing for 20 years. A single program on each chair. Suite in 3 movements for piano. For M composed 1968. Premiered tonight by the composer's granddaughter. Maren played the lullaby for her mother in the second row. She played the walk home for the street she had walked that afternoon with her mother, the same streets her grandmother had walked at 26 with a young composer in the autumn of 1967. She played What You Will Find After for the door he had not closed in time and for the door he had left open for her 57 years later at the bottom of a piano bench. The room held the last chord with her. 200 people who had come for chamber music sat very still for the length of a held breath, and then Kjell in the front row stood, and the row behind him stood, and the row behind them. The applause came as one warm wave. Maren bowed once to the keyboard. Then she turned and bowed to the second row, where her mother was crying quietly the way she had cried in the front room that first October afternoon. After, in the lobby, an elderly woman Maren had never met touched her sleeve. She had been a student of Axel's that one autumn in 1968, she said. She had been 20 years old. He had been the best teacher she had ever had. She had stood at the back of his funeral with the other students, and she had been waiting 57 years to hear what he had been working on at home, and she could die now and not feel cheated. She said it without theatre. Maren took her hands and did not let go of them for a while. 2 other men, both in their late 70s, came up after, quieter, and pressed Maren's hands and went away without giving their names. A young pianist Maren did not know was waiting near the door. She was perhaps 20. She had a small notebook out. She asked, very politely, whether the score would be published. Maren said yes. She said the Royal College in Stockholm had already written, the recordings would follow in the autumn. The girl thanked her and turned away with her face very full. That night, in the small hotel near the cathedral, her mother said, "He would have liked you." "I know," Maren said. "I played his music." Years later, when Maren had a daughter of her own and the daughter was 12 and curious about the framed photograph in the living room, a black and white of a young man with dark hair leaning on a piano, the only picture of him that had survived, Maren would sit her on the bench and lift the lid and take out a soft folder of original manuscript and tell her this story. She would tell her about the funeral on a Tuesday in October. She would tell her about a kettle and a kitchen table and a mother who had waited 57 years. She would tell her about an old musicologist with an applewood cane and a hall on Trädgårdsgatan with a plaque on the door. She would tell her that her great-grandfather had been a young composer who had not come home from Oslo, and that her great-grandmother had walked the same walk in the dark every night until she died, and that the music had been waiting for them all, the way music does, in a bench under the lid, where the woman who loved him had put it. Then she would put the daughter's small hands on the keys and teach her the first 8 bars of the lullaby for a daughter I haven't met. The daughter learned it quickly. The daughter, when she was older, would teach it to her own. That was what music could do, Maren told her daughter, and what her grandmother had finally let it do, bring a man back into a room a long time after he had left, and let his daughter and his granddaughter and his great-granddaughter hear him say the things he had not been able to stay long enough to say. A piano bench was a small box of wood. Inside it, sometimes, was the rest of a family. Maren closed the lid gently when the daughter had finished her practice. The mantel clock, which Maren had wound for 20 years now, and which still kept the time her grandmother had set it to, ticked steadily on into the evening, and the green-shuttered house held them all, the living and the long missing, in the only kind of quiet that music ever really leaves behind.